Hey, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining Akili's webcast, How to Transform Your Supply Chain with Anaplan, a live demonstration of Akili's supply chain accelerator. So briefly, the agenda today, we'll do some intros of the folks on the line from Akili, some housekeeping items, as we call them, in terms of how to just interact with the GoToWebinar today. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about who Akili is, as an Anaplan partner and as a supply chain service integrator. We'll talk a little bit about Anaplan, the platform, and really where they are in the marketplace today and their trajectory as a business. And then we'll hand it over for the demonstration of our accelerator, and then we'll wrap it up with some question and answer. So before we get started, just a few things to keep in mind. Everyone's audio will be muted for the duration of the call today. Please use the on-screen chat panel if you do experience any issues with the audio, and we have a couple moderators that can help us out there. Feel free to submit questions at any time through the on-screen chat box. There's a specific question area, so just keep that in mind. If you guys have anything throughout the webinar, feel free to add those, and we'll get to them at the end. The full presentation and recording will be emailed to you by this Friday, so we'll go ahead and download that and get that out to you guys. And then also, if you guys notice in the chat panel, we have two different handouts that you guys can download. One is the Quip case study, the mail order tooth care company that we actually leverage this accelerator to help build out their Anaplan solution, and then also a case study for Lodge Cast Iron that you may be familiar with, that we did a very large supply chain project with as well. So encourage you guys to download those and take a look. So just a little bit about Akili. Don't want to spend too much time here. Actually, you know what? Let me back up here for a moment. I'm so sorry there. I want to introduce our other speaker today. So on the line with me is Josh Wheeler. Josh is our senior business planning consultant. He leads our supply chain practice here at Akili. He's been with us for about 2 years now, and prior to being with Akili, he was the associate finance manager of FP&A and supply chain at Kimberly-Clark. So not only is he a consultant with us today, but he was actually a user of Anaplan in a previous life, which really adds to kind of his view of the world and his ability to really translate those business requirements into an Anaplan solution. So Josh, thanks for being on, and excited to have you participate today. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about Akili. Akili means knowledge in Swahili. Our co-founder and current CEO is of Kenyan descent. So when we were thinking about ideas of a name back in the 90s, looking for a name that really resonated with the type of business we were, being custom app development, but also one, oddly enough, that made sense from a phone book perspective, Akili stood out to us, and it's stuck ever since. We're headquartered in Dallas with the core group of our folks right here, with hubs in Houston, Atlanta, and Denver. As I mentioned before, we were founded in 1992 as a custom app development shop and have been around ever since, evolving into a enterprise performance management shop in the mid-2000s as an early OutlookSoft partner, which was then acquired by SAP and then fast-tracked as a BPC partner, ultimately becoming an Anaplan partner in 2014, and since that time achieving their highest level partner tiering of gold and winning some other awards along the way. So what do we do here at Akili? At our core, we are a business planning consulting organization. So if you think about business planning or enterprise performance management, there's three main buckets of that. There's FP&A, there's sales performance management, and there's supply chain management. Akili supports all three use cases with our legacy really in FP&A. Today we'll be talking about what we've done in the supply chain space, specifically with this accelerator solution. Coming from the custom application development world, being in the SAP landscape for quite a bit of time, data and analytics were a big part of our project. So we still carry that with us today. We have a dedicated practice to that. So whether it's direct integrations using different tools like Informatica or MuleSoft, or just helping really understand how to leverage your data effectively for Anaplan, that's a core piece of what we do. And so is the people and process side of it. So there's a term we call organizational change management, or business process analysis, that we have a dedicated practice here at Akili for. And while sometimes we'll sell those offerings or position those offerings independently, they're always part of our projects and layered in terms of our methodology, driving that end user adoption and ultimately the success of that project. A little bit deeper here, we feel this is a bit of a differentiator for Akili in the Anaplan space, that dedicated integration practice there. So we're partnered formally with Informatica, Dell Boomi, and SnapLogic, but we've worked with a number of other ETL tools. And you actually see here in the graphic a representation of all the different softwares we've truly integrated Anaplan to. So this is not just a nice slide. This is actual work we've done. And we actually have some other ones out there in the real estate space, as an example, Yardi, MRI. So it's not limited to these, but these are some of the core tools we've integrated with. And when you think about Anaplan and our partnership in the context of Anaplan, it's really all about what they call connected planning. It's the category they're really pioneering. And when you look at Akili, we believe that we are a true connected planning partner. And as I spoke about just a couple slides ago, not only do we support all three functional use cases with the Anaplan ecosystem, we bring that together with the integration services and the organizational change management pieces as well. And then talking a little bit about who we are as a business and some of the awards and designations we've had over the years. We talked about our Anaplan gold tiering, something we're very proud of. We achieved that in the first year of their tiering and continued that here in 2019. We're also an SAP partner. We're a national minority supplier. But most importantly, we've been awarded Best Companies to Work For in Texas for a number of years now, achieving our highest status this year in 2019 at number 17. It's something that we are most proud of from an award standpoint because it really reflects upon the culture we have here, the type of people that we hire and the environment we have. And frankly, that's really important to those on the line because that's how we show up with you. That's how we interact with our clients in the field, and we believe that comes through on our projects and our engagements. So a little bit about Anaplan. I'm not going to spend too much time here being an Anaplan partner, but I do want to help people understand kind of their trajectory. Anaplan's been around for a while, but they really went to market in 2011 and have experienced some tremendous growth since then. So you see a number of numbers here in terms of that growth. They're at over 1,000 customers today. Most of those are household names. You guys know they're big clients. They've really made a mark in the marketplace. With Anaplan across the different use cases. They recently IPO'd last October, so that was really exciting to see as a partner. And obviously, there's been a really nice kind of momentum boost from that. But really, what we want to resonate here is that Anaplan is here to stay. They're really pioneering this category of connected planning and changing the way large enterprise organizations look at the planning function. And why have they been so successful? Well, I think for a number of reasons on their unique technology side, but it's really because these existing solutions just were not meeting the needs of businesses today. When you think about legacy solutions like SAP BPC or Oracle's Hyperion or TM1, they're just clunky. They rely on IT. They're not nimble. They're not dynamic. They're not supporting organizations in kind of the new world today with Amazon and disruption and needing to be very nimble in the field in terms of your decision making. Point products, right? They're siloed. They don't have those platform capabilities. You're not able to communicate between functions in a business, and that is so important today when sales and finance and supply chain all really need to be looking at the same world and acting in the same way. And then, of course, just manual processes. So many of our customers come to Akili and come to Anaplan coming off of some, Excel, frankly, right? And those manual homegrown processes, whether it's sitting on someone's laptop or siloed, right, in a certain function of a business. It's just not scalable, it's not safe for a business, and it doesn't lend itself to, actionable strategic decision making. And those are the reasons why Anaplan has just done so well. And the reason why they're doing so well from a technology standpoint and why they're different is really this connected planning platform idea. Anaplan is not a point solution. It is truly a platform that you can build from the ground up, elements of FP&A or elements of supply chain or elements of sales performance management and connect them under one tool. So you're sharing the same data, updates in real time. Obviously, you can use different security restrictions so people in HR aren't seeing, sales data, some of your kind of 101s of enterprise software. But at the end of the day, it's a very unique tool in the way that it can support all these different planning functions. And it's really why we believe and why we partnered with them in supporting their trajectory today. So going a little bit deeper in this idea of connected planning, we're not going to spend too much time here, but this is what they call their honeycomb. This was recently trademarked, and if you guys on the line were able to see Frank Calderoni, their CEO, on Mad Money a couple weeks back, they really dove into this honeycomb idea of connected planning and starting with maybe one or two use cases in a specific functional area, whether that be finance or corporate, supply chain, or sales, and then you're kind of percolating out from there, if you will. So today we're obviously focusing on supply chain, and you'll see a little bit around the core capabilities of supply chain today. With our accelerator, really looking at that left or kind of top left quadrant there. I guess it wouldn't be quadrant, but areas of inventory planning, S&OP, demand planning, supply planning, capacity planning. Those core pieces of supply chain are going to be incorporated into the accelerator that you guys see today. And then, of course, there's so much more you can do with the tool. And lastly, some awards that Anaplan has achieved lately. Anaplan is the only planning tool or EPM tool, CPM tool, whatever term you want to use, that's been acknowledged by Gartner in the top right quadrant across all those different functional areas. So very unique in the space. And this is, I think, just a really good validator in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it differently than a lot of the competitors out there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Wheeler. He's going to take you through a couple slides on our accelerator and just to kind of provide a baseline of Anaplan from a technology standpoint, and then move into the demonstration. So with that, Josh, speak to these slides, and I'll hand you presenter when we get to the demo. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so just to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering today, we have what we call an accelerator for supply chain. It's basically an application that we have developed internally at Akili, leveraging a lot of the deliverables that we've given to clients in the past in the supply chain space. So the key thing here that we really want the group to take away is what this application really does is help demonstrate the art of the possible within Anaplan. As we all know, different supply chains have different requirements and unique business needs. So what we try to do is identify what those best practices are and put them in one spot, and really just kind of walk through for potential customers, right, what the art of the possible really is in Anaplan. So a lot of times what we'll do when we actually get into our deals with customers, we'll kind of go through a little bit more detail and requirements, and then try to take aspects of the supply chain accelerator, apply it wherever necessary, but more often than not, try to come up with a specific business fit for your unique needs. If you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So the thing that we want to do is just kind of cover some simple Anaplan 101. Really, it's frequently asked questions that we get from customers, and then also some terminology that will really help facilitate keeping us all on the same page as we go through the demonstration itself. So from Anaplan 101 perspective, a very common question that we get is regarding time. So Anaplan does come native with different calendar types, right? So you can do a typical monthly planning level, or even down to a weekly, which allows you to then even go further at a daily level. So the weekly calendar, you know, it comes in different formats such as 445, 454, a general 52-week calendar, and 13 4-week periods. There is even the flexibility to have custom time scale if absolutely needed. A lot of times customers have a concern as to how much data can I actually load into Anaplan from a historical standpoint, and how far out can I forecast into the future. So you can go as far back as 50 years of historicals and as far forward as 30 years of forecast. Another common question that we have is around versions. So versions is really, you know, when you think of a lot of organizations, they have monthly planning cycles. So they might have a June forecast, a July forecast, budget, and actuals. These are what are called versions in Anaplan, right? So there's really no limit to the number of versions that you have. What we find is kind of a best practice, or what's most common throughout different companies, is really just that 12 monthly forecast. So again, that June forecast, August forecast level, a version for actuals, budget, and then typically something like AOP. Another common question that we get is, can I copy one version to another? So let's say, for example, that we wrapped up the June forecast and we're about to go into July forecast here in the next couple of days. What you can do is you could take that June forecast and actually do what's called a bulk copy to July. So it takes all of your assumptions from the prior month forecast and gives you a really good starting point for your July forecast, and then you can kind of layer in any assumptions that you have going forward. The great advantage with having versions that are all in one spot is that you can have variance analysis among those versions. So if I want to compare July versus June, or if I want to compare July versus budget, or even say prior year, you have that flexibility in the tool. And then, as Sean alluded to earlier, there is very, very powerful security measures that are in Anaplan. So you have the ability to set up what are called user profiles. So what that does is allows you to restrict really the access of what different users can see. So for example, you could have a profile for a finance manager, sales rep, production planner. So in the case of the finance manager, they'll have access to some of that salary information that you might be leveraging for headcount OpEx planning, whereas the sales rep and production planners, they won't have that level of access. So there's that aspect of having security within Anaplan itself. Next slide, please. So then just kind of level setting out some terminology here. So on the left, you can see we have some terminology that we'd like to cover. So what we're going to show you guys today is a model. So it's the supply chain accelerator model. And I'd really like you guys to kind of think of that as an Excel workbook, right? So if you think of a lot of your organizations, you might have an Excel workbook or several sets of Excel workbooks for finance, specifically for headcount planning and cost center spend planning. Separately, your production planners might be using a different set of Excel workbooks to actually come up with a production schedule, right? So this model is going to be in that supply chain production planning space. I'll also refer to something called a module. And so what a module really is kind of like a core logic area within Anaplan itself. So think of that as an Excel tab. So if you have an Excel workbook, you have different tabs that might have different calculations functioning on those. So that's essentially what a module is. And then finally, there's a line item. So a line item would be something as simple as a formula in Excel. So if I need to calculate gross sales, I would take price times revenue, and that's basically what I would put into a line item. Another common question that we get is how is Anaplan structured? And so what it really does is leverages the concept called lists. And so what is a list? It's basically exactly that. So it could be a list of employees, it could be a list of general ledger accounts, it could be a list of SKUs and customers, etc. So throughout the model, you'll see how everything's functioning in kind of like a pivot table type view that you can actually do a drop down on different lists. Another common question that we get is how is Anaplan used? So more often than not, customers use it as a custom solution, not really as an out-of-the-box solution. The next question that we commonly get is, well, does Anaplan provide those out-of-box solutions? So that's exactly what we're going to be demonstrating today is the supply chain accelerator. That's one out-of-the-box solution that customers could utilize. Anaplan actually has a internal centralized location for all applications that are Anaplan produced. And so those can also be out-of-the-box solutions. What we find more often than not is that companies are unique, that they require a level of customization. So for that standpoint, we basically try to build everything from scratch, if you will. And so what does that really mean? How do we build from scratch? So the answer is kind of like yes and no. Everything needs to be built from scratch, where when you open up Anaplan, what you're doing, you're buying the platform itself. So it's kind of a clean slate when you open it for the first time. And then from there, what we do, we start building into different logic pieces to actually meet your planning needs, right? And that's really where Akili comes into this space, and we bring, the experience and efficiency to help reduce the time to actually implement a full solution for you guys. So that's just kind of level set on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm going to hand you presenter, and then we'll let you take it away with the demonstration.
Awesome. All right, so when I open up Anaplan for the first time, what I have here is what's called a dashboard view. So these dashboard views are fully customized. In this case, we set this one up specifically for the supply chain accelerator model. Just to kind of give you a lay of the land, aside from the dashboard view, there's actually a side contents panel over here. And it's kind of a quick start view where basically I can view all the contents that are within this model. So it gives me the flexibility of just doing expand and collapse. And as I drill into these, you can basically see the types of areas that are available within this particular model. So if I look under monthly planning, you'll have demand review, supply review, and then some S&OP views as well. So that's just kind of a quick start view there. Just kind of digesting what's all on the dashboard here. So what this is doing is just defining the different types of role types that we have within this particular model. So everything from a production planner, finance manager, exec, and sales team. As I kind of roll through this at a high level, what we're going to be showing you is the features and functionality of the model. So there's going to be some aspect of doing monthly planning at that higher level, and then converting that into the weekly execution. So basically saying, how do I take my demand volume at a monthly level and break that down to something that the production planners can actually leverage for planning purposes. So up here are a couple blue buttons here. What these are called are action buttons. So this first one is really just going to demonstrate the flexibility for how you can develop workflow within a dashboard view and also manage how you bring data into the system. So what we have here is basically a bunch of action buttons that would basically run processes to pull data in. So Anaplan is very flexible in the sense that if you just have a CSV file that's sitting on your desktop, you can just simply upload that. Or if you want to take the more sophisticated automated approach, as Sean alluded to earlier, we are an integration partner, and we can actually use different ETL tools or even the native connection tool called Anaplan Connect to then tap into your different master data sources and actually bring that in on a more automated schedule approach. This is just to demonstrate what those actions kind of look like. So as I click on this button, it gives you a description of what is actually going to be performed. So in this case, it's going to be loading some data at a components and finished good level into the model. Once you do that, it actually allows you to build tables so that you can visualize the data that you're importing. So really it's good from an administration standpoint where someone can come in here and just confirm visually that the data has in fact loaded for that current period. And then they can basically do some exception management reporting to identify if anything's missing. So this is just a really good example for how we structure some of the workflow dashboards from an administrative standpoint, just to get the data into the model itself. Going back to the dashboard here, I'm going to then click on this score dashboard, which really highlights the power of taking the data and really visualizing it into a way that users can really try to do trend analysis, right? So what we have here, just some typical different KPIs and metrics that we typically find companies like to monitor from a supply chain standpoint, right? So in this case, you have inventory turns per week. What it's doing is visualizing the data on a monthly basis, right? As I scroll through here, you can kind of see the different types of visualization that we have. So again, you can manage, your inventory of weeks of sales, look at different factors and such. Down here, what this is basically doing is just visualizing data at not just the metrics level, but looking at a specific metric by partner, right? So in this case, this model is set up to assume that we have several contract manufacturers that are partners in the system that are actually going to be producing the product that we'll be shipping into our inventory. So this just kind of gives a visualization of fill rate by partner, order fulfillment, et cetera. It's really good from a benchmarking standpoint as well, because you can visually see which partners are outperforming each other, and then really help drive some conversations when you're doing contract manufacturer management from a performance standpoint. Going back to the main dashboard, I'm going to open up what's called the finance review. So this is really just to demonstrate how you can not only just take your production planning, but also assign revenue and cost to it so that you can do an analysis of what the financial impacts are from your production plan. So in this case, the way that this model is structured is we look at customers that are broken into different channels, right? So we have partner, retail, online, and owned. So I can actually see the revenue that's associated with the demand volume at that channel level. Again, this is just kind of visualizing it in different ways. So in this case, I can look at it by month on a line chart view. And as I alluded to before, Anaplan has the ability to leverage what's called versions, right? So what this is doing is actually saying, let me compare the quantity and volume for a specific channel, for actual forecast, and then different forecast versions. So we have a January update, a February update, and a March forecast. So again, just giving you that power of being able to simultaneously view different forecasts within the model real time. And then down here is just a demonstration of how you can then structure that data in a typical table format, right? So in this case, what I'm looking at is quantity, and then I can see the cost and revenue associated to calculate what my gross margin is. And again, what this is doing is actually showing us what that is at a channel level. So I can basically go through and cycle through the different channel levels, and then also go through and look at the different forecast versions, right? And then at the very bottom here, it's actually looking at a more granular SKU level. So again, this is just demonstrating the different ways that you can structure hierarchies so that you can then do analysis at different levels throughout the model. So going back to the dashboard here, that was just kind of giving an overview of some of the summary level visualization that's capable in Anaplan. Now we're going to go into the actual monthly planning. So here I'm going to open the supply review dashboard. And what this is really is the consensus demand, right? So what this dashboard demonstrates is that you have different volume assumptions coming from different areas of the company. So you basically have the forecast coming from your demand planner. You have an AOP target that was set at the beginning of the year. There's a placeholder here for statistical forecast. And then whatever forecast that you would get from your marketing, sales, and finance teams. So what this does is it actually allows you to basically view all of those different iterations of demand volume, and then looking at what the average of all those plans are, and actually gives you the ability to go in here and basically override those as needed, right? So as you're overriding these, you're actually aligning on what that consensus demand is based on the input from all your different areas. Then there's also the associated projected revenue and cost, and again, the margin that's available with that. And then as you're coming up with the consensus demand, it's actually giving you a visualization as to what your warehouse capacity utilization in this aspect. So again, from that connected planning standpoint, it's allowing you to bring in demand plan volume from all different areas of the company, assign financial impact to that, and then also look at what your supply chain impact is from a utilization standpoint. Moving down here is just an example of some heat mapping capability. So in this case, what this is doing is just showing essentially at a product category level, just different metrics and of heat mapping so that you can basically do some management by exception, right? So going back to the main dashboard here, another aspect of looking at this consensus demand is the concept of being able to leave notes, right? So as we have different members that are throughout the organization in this tool, they can all simultaneously be adjusting the forecast. And what this actually does is allow you to have the capability of putting in notes. So in this case, what I can do here is, override this one and say, supply chain team, review the current plan. So as I dynamically leave notes, it's there. It's there as long as I leave it there. You have the capability of erasing it, and then if you're leveraging versions, right, this note might be specific for the July forecast. When I toggle over to the August forecast, then I could actually leave a completely different set of notes for August. So it does leave a good audit trail from like a commentary standpoint so that people can level set on what the assumptions are for the inputs that they're putting into the model. This next one that I'm going to be showing is really just the executive S&OP. So again, just kind of demonstrating like the high level capability of creating dashboards specific for different members throughout the organization. So in this one, this is really for that executive level review. So again, it's just kind of showing the data visualized on the pie chart for what % of volume is based on channel. Then it also is showing % of volume based on geographic region. And then showing just different visualization of volume in terms of the different product categories. So again, this one's just a very good demonstration as to the level of functionality that you can build from a dashboard summary level. Another common question is, what's the export capability that you have available in Anaplan? So if I click on this button here, I can basically export this dashboard to a PDF. So let's say we structure this in a particular way that we want to include in a monthly PowerPoint presentation or a monthly deck that's distributed throughout the team. You quickly just do an export and then print this off and include that in your deck, or email it out to respective parties as necessary. So going back to the main dashboard, that was basically covering the monthly planning aspect. So at that point, once we align on the consensus demand for that current month, now let's break that apart into how we plan and execute on a weekly level. So I'm going to go under demand planning, taking a look here. What this does again is just basically shows me my volume by month, but now we're kind of getting more into the nitty gritty, right? So basically having more availability of looking at the different partner levels, and actually looking at how the demand is being aggregated to or distributed to the different warehouse locations throughout the partner network. So kind of what's going on behind the scenes is basically an allocation methodology to say, take your demand plan and based on the allocation methodology, assign it to the respective partners and their respective warehouses. So in this case, this gives me the availability to drill down to a specific warehouse. And I can look at the different product hierarchies, and I can actually drill down to the lowest level SKU to actually see, what's that forecast at the SKU level, and some of the other metrics that are associated with that. At the same time, I'm able to still look at that heat mapping capability and try to just, really try to manage by exception for whatever line items are red. If I want to go into a little bit more detail, what this allows me to do is say, okay, well, this is the demand volume that I have for this particular SKU. If I go to the sales assumptions, this actually brings me to a dashboard that the sales team would be using, where they can actually look at a SKU level and basically look at a customer level and even at a particular forecast. So let's say March forecast and month, and see what that detail is of the volume that's coming through from a production standpoint. So it's really going to the that granular level that sales is planning at, that is ultimately impacting what I need to account for from a production planning standpoint. So going back then, once I have that, I'm going to go down to a level further to the supply planning. So here, it's basically giving me a visualization of what my net inventory is by all of the sites within the network, and just visualizing that data so I have an idea of how that inventory is performing, not only at a site level, but also over time. So you can see that it's forecasting from week 35 out through the end of the year in this case. Then I do have the flexibility again of looking at the different SKU levels, right? So this is actually at that lowest SKU granularity level, and it allows me to then aggregate it up at the total product category level. Or I can even just look at all items throughout the entire network. Then what that's doing is basically taking it and breaking it apart into 3 types of production planning levels, right? So as a company, there's the production that I can do in-house. There's what I can purchase from a third party. So what this is basically doing is breaking that out into those different levels, right? So what should I buy and what should I produce? And a lot of the logic's the same. It's just basically based on what we can produce internally, but essentially showing you the different metrics that are associated with how we calculate our suggested minimum order quantity. So in this case, it's showing our inventory levels. It's calculating what we have on hand. Looking at what our demand is from the demand volume, looking at what's committed, and then all the ins and outs that we have to get to a net inventory level. Then it also has a calculation here to calculate what our safety stock level. The way that we have this set up right now is basically saying calculate the weeks of supply and then manage safety stock to basically flex off of the weeks of supply and trigger our reorder points based on weeks of supply. So if I scroll down here from the top level and then go through the product hierarchy and then down to that SKU level, what I can see then here is that it's calculating weeks of supply, and it's giving me that reorder point here based on the calculated suggestions here. The other thing that I can do is really then do some overrides, and then as I do overrides, it's going to basically reprofile the reorder point within my model. So let's say I'm willing to carry 10 weeks of inventory, then it actually provides a different reorder point on a time scale. So with no adjustment, it's basically saying I should do a reorder point in week 41. As I flex this information here, it's basically going to give me a reorder point earlier in the cycle. So the good thing about this is that what you can do, you can basically manage your inventory levels like that, and you can actually align reorder points to fall in the same week. So a lot of times when you're going with suppliers, the requested calculated amount might be over different weeks, and what this does is allow you to target it all in one week, so you can have some economies of scale from a pricing standpoint, as long as your supplier has the capacity to do all that production within that week. So going back to the main dashboard, again, this model is really based off of the weeks of supply calculation. So what this is doing is basically showing me by site and by SKU that heat map, right? The managed by exception. So I can basically say, okay, looking at this SKU, I can see that I'm red in week 45, right? And so what I can do here, I can actually undock this dashboard and then look at the other one that we were looking at before. And as I click through these, that's the nice thing about the dynamics within Anaplan. As I click through these, all the dashboards are actually updating at the same time. So when I click on here, I knew that I had an issue in week 45, so I could basically go into this other dashboard, undock this, and make my management adjustments here in order to level set and align on my forecast assumptions. Right. So that's another good functionality of Anaplan, is just the availability of just being able to undock and work simultaneously throughout the model. This other dashboard here is really then saying, once I've gone through and I've established, all of my overrides from a weeks of supply standpoint, now what I want to do is basically finalize that schedule, send it to my suppliers so that they know what to produce, and then basically give them that information to manage too. So what we can do here is actually take that information and set up an action that's basically going to export into Excel. So you can see the actions that are doing here is basically creating a supplier order schedule for a couple of the different partners that we have. So as I click that, it's basically cycling through those and kicking out different Excel files. So at this point, what I can do is then give this information to the supplier via email. And all it's doing is really showing by SKU, by site, by week, what are the quantity needed from that particular supplier in this case. A lot of times we get questions also about the capability of just having portals directly for the vendors to enter that information or view it. So there is the concept of having licenses with your Anaplan licenses with your vendor partners, where you can actually create custom dashboards where they could actually come in here, put their own inputs, or actually just pull the information on demand as needed. The dashboards down here below, again, are just kind of showing that heat mapping capability, so I can manage by exception, you know, any excess weeks of supply that I have at a SKU level. And then the final dashboard that I want to review here is the production dashboard. So this one is actually showing me that capacity constraint, right? So the main thing that I want to know is not only can I send a supplier shipment schedule to my partners, but can I get visibility as to what their capacity is, and can they even fulfill that suggested supplier shipment schedule based on their own capacity? So what this allows me to do is basically turn on and off different capacity levels, right? So let's say in week 34, I know that either internally my production facilities or even my partners' production facilities are going to be down for holidays, as an example. What I can do is I can actually shut off all of these assets dynamically. And as I'm doing that, it's actually recalculating what I'm able to, how much demand volume I can actually route through the assets for that week. So if I turn all of these off, then obviously I can't produce anything that week. If I only turn off a couple of them, you know, what it's going to do is actually route the volume to the respective assets that are capable of producing it. And then again, that capability of just doing a quick export where after I level set on what the available capacity is by specific asset, then I can publish that schedule very quickly in Excel and distribute either internally at my own production facilities or you know, to my supplier vendors that are doing contract manufacturing on our behalf. So with that, covers the items that we wanted to highlight for the demonstration.
Great, thank you, Josh. Yeah, if you want to hand me back presenter, we'll just wrap it up with some Q&A and some next steps. Perfect. Thank you, Josh. So thanks again for going through that. Hopefully you guys, were able to get a good sense of the power of Anaplan, from a supply chain perspective, also just kind of the way it looks and feels and how you can operate within there, and how it may be able to improve the way your organization is doing your supply chain planning across those different kind of key areas. With that, we'll open it up for some questions. Josh, looks like the first question is pretty straightforward. It's just a sense of how do we structure our projects in terms of, they're asking about, how do we determine if we're going to use an accelerator versus a build from scratch, kind of per your slides prior to the demo?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so typically when we get into projects with our customers, what we have as part of our implementation methodology is a period called foundations. So foundations is really where we do requirement gathering with your team on site, and we try to identify really what your current state process is and desired future state, and really get into the nitty-gritty detail as to what your process is. During that period, typically it's anywhere from a week to 3 weeks, depending on the number of use cases that your company is interested in doing in Anaplan. Once we go through that process, we'll be able to identify whether we can leverage an accelerator or if we have to do more of that custom solution development approach that we mentioned before. Great.
I actually don't have any other questions, but I may drop one just to plant a seed, and then we'll break for the group. I think it's a great benefit. Josh, you've written, for us on the blog, and I mentioned in some presentations, kind of the 5 main components that make for a successful Anaplan project. I hate to put you on the spot, but would you mind maybe walking through those briefly with the team, and then we'll wrap it up?
Oh yeah, for sure. So those 5 steps, the main ones are really identifying who your subject matter experts are throughout the organization, right? So if you want to undertake production planning, you really want to identify who are those core production planners that really understand the current state process and that could really be leveraged throughout the project. Not only do we need them to understand what current state looks like, but we also want to bring them along for the ride. So as we implement that project, we want them to be very involved so they know what's being built and they have a level of comfort with how to actually manage the tool and how to manage their future workflow within Anaplan. And again, that just relates into the second thing, which is really what does current state look like, right? So a lot of times during that foundations requirements gathering period, we'll do a lot of process mapping. If customers can do that on the front end and they have very clean process maps, that actually helps cut out a lot of time on our end of having to do that research with you on site. We can really just leverage any existing process mapping that you guys had. And that also gives us an idea as to whether or not we can leverage an accelerator or do the custom development approach. Another one is really around communication throughout the organization, right? So really having that executive sponsorship and that buy-in throughout the organization. So you really want to make sure that the people that are going to be using the tool, that they're engaged throughout the entire project, and that they're really being enabled to own that as soon as the implementation is complete. And then the really the last one that I want to cover is just what we call get your hands dirty, right? So we don't want to just build this very robust tool and then just hand it to you, and then that's the first time that you've ever seen it and never used it, right? So what we like to recommend while we're in the actual project implementation phase with customers is to go into Anaplan and do something Anaplan related 15 minutes a day. What you'll find is that 15 minutes can quickly turn into a couple of hours, and then if you do that on a daily basis, it's going to be a very quick learning curve for you to really understand not only how to use the tool, but how you can even know how to build within the tool so that in the future, if there's any enhancements that your organization wants to take, that you guys have that internal capability to then actually lead that development on your own.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Josh, and thank you for taking everybody through the demonstration of Akili's Anaplan Supply Chain Accelerator this morning. Again, I hope everybody got some value out of this. We'll be following up with everybody with the recording no later than this Friday, but of course, feel free to reach out to us. We're excited to talk to you guys about Anaplan and our experience implementing supply chain solutions with Anaplan for clients such as Nike, Borden Dairy, Dish Network, Lodge Manufacturing, and more. And would love to tell you about what we've seen out there in the market and potentially work with you guys on working with you guys around an Anaplan project. So with that, we'll end it for today. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll be in touch soon.